We now call upon our next speaker for today's, for the third session. And we have Dr. Sreemoyee Tarafdar with us. She's the Assistant Professor of Psychology, West Bengal State University. And she will be, her title for today's talk is Her Story, Women's Narrative Through the Lens of a Clinical Psychologist. Over to Sreemoyee ma'am. Sreemoyee ma'am.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you.
I'll be sharing my slides. So give me an indication if it is visible to everybody, and then we can go ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for having me over. And is everybody here comfortable with English being the language of communication? Is it okay with everybody?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
Okay.
I would just like to make a request to the participants. Kindly post your questions in the chat box. That would make make us it will allow us to stick to the time frame that we have kept for each session. So kindly put the questions in the chat box. Okay, so that is a request. Thank you. Ma'am, over to you.
Yes. Is my screen visible to everybody?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay. I will go in the slideshow mode, but before that, let me just quickly thank the team at Lady Brabourne for getting this entire thing together. And this is really, really an honor that I also get to be a part of her story, your initiative, and may it be a historical initiative being taken and not a historical one, because we will not have pleasant things to talk about. So I may also want to give you a bit of a trigger warning, because I will be sharing narratives of clients from my practice, and I have concentrated on the present more so, because I thought that it is very essential to talk about the here and now, so that we are clearer about our future. We already are aware of our pasts. It is very important to trace the journey of the here and now also. So kindly understand that some of these information which is being shared with you, obviously, is confidential information. Therefore, I will not be sharing a lot of details. A few details regarding age and place of residence has been changed in order to protect the identity of my clients. But few of the narratives may be disturbing. So it might happen because you are not used to this kind of discourse being shared of what is the trauma sharing that happens in the clinical space. So I am just putting in a word before I start. And like I said, I'm very thankful for this opportunity that I'm getting at the ICSSR ERC-sponsored online 7-day international interdisciplinary platform of gender sensitization workshop. So I'm going to talk for about 40 minutes, and then we'll keep time for some interactions, because I think that will be more enriching for the participants. And especially, I just saw how interactive the participants are. So I am also very tempted to go ahead with that kind of an interaction. So without further ado, let me get started with her story. So the title of my talk is Women's Narratives Through the Lens of a Clinical Psychologist. I'm Sreemoyee. I have been in clinical practice for the last 18 years. But also I must say that the last 2 to 3 years, the amount of work that has come the way of mental health professionals, clinical psychologists, psychotherapists, all around, the world, I think, has been just immense, and the kind of mental health issues that it has brought, the pandemic in its wake, is now being referred to as the silent pandemic. I have chosen 5 tales to share with you today. They are all COVID pandemic referrals. Like I said, that the number of referrals have gone up. Essentially, all of these clients have come to me during the pandemic. And like I said, that I want to concentrate on her story in the present. I have chosen these 5 stories. The Tale of a Girl, Skinny Enough, is chapter 1. The Tale of the Daughter, the Daddy's Girl, is chapter 2. Tale of the Married Woman, Coffee, is the 3rd episode. Tale of the Mother, the Monster Mom, is the 4th. And the Tale of the Widow, Karwa Chauth, is the 5th. I will also be highlighting from my studies, empirical studies that have been done during the pandemic on working mothers, which concentrates on parenting in the pandemic, and study 2, the status of women mental health practitioners. And I will conclude with certain questions to the house. I have nothing to teach, not to preach, just to share. And let our journey of sharing begin with the tale of the girl, not skinny enough. Also, I would like to add that all the illustrations that I have used in my presentation today are from my client's drawings. The client who I will be talking about now, it is from her art journal. I have used the drawings with her permission, and somehow all of it just comes together with her drawings. So this client, she started coming to me as a first-year student of MBBS, 19-year-old. She's from Kolkata. She was putting on weight and reported body image issues, relationship issues. There was a lot of binge purge happening, which means that she would eat a lot of food, then feel guilty about eating that much of food, and throw up. So she would induce vomiting, or she would take certain pills which would induce loose motions and diarrhea, so that she does not, keep the food in her system and let it turn into fat. In one of her sessions, she shared this with me, that I feel like a dead being, like life has been sucked out of me. To give life to the flowers that are growing on my back, just like how in my relationships, I give until I feel empty and dead, and devote all my energy to make sure that the other person blooms and grows. In this context, let me talk about a relationship with a 20-year-old man who was with her through a very difficult journey. She was seeing him since she was 17 years old, and in 11th standard. And she also lost her father, who was a doctor as well, during that period of time. So this boyfriend of hers was very supportive during that period, and she was completely taken care of by him with his support and everything. Later, he left for the States just before the pandemic, and she came to know that he is in a relationship with another girl there. He vehemently denied being in a relationship, but finally it was found out that he was in fact cheating her, and that for her was a deal breaker. But she realized later on that there were many a times when she had ignored these red flags which were there in the relationship, and she'd ignored them at her own cost. And she went on to continuously give in the relationship, and later on felt extremely, extremely cheated. So she said that I'm blaming myself and telling myself that it happened because I'm not good enough or pretty enough or skinny enough. Exactly her words. So understand that how the body had to take the brunt of it all, of the rejection, of the cheating, of a partner, of another, where she positioned herself as not being pretty enough, not being skinny enough, and not being good enough for him. So there were persistent incidents of binge purge, unhealthy relationship with food and eating. She would often tell me that I cannot look at food without counting calories. And there would be days where she would not even have a meal and she would just continuously go on that cycle where she's not eating at all. And then at night, because she would be very, very hungry, she would eat a lot of junk food. Or she would have, dry food that is available, like biscuits or chips, or maybe just pull out a chocolate jar of Nutella, and she would just straight up eat from that jar. And then she would get into this vicious cycle where she would feel very, very guilty because of it, and then start purging, which is vomiting. So she would punish herself for eating, she would feel guilty. She would also self-harm in the sense that she would not look at all that she has achieved in her life, look at all the positives, but she would go on continuously inflicting harm on herself by brutally cutting herself on her arms, on her thighs. She would shave off parts of her hair, and she would continuously be doing this, where she kept on blaming herself for being this person who gave in to that man who believed him and who nurtured the relationship. She's also started facing adequacy issues where her studies were suffering, her self-esteem was suffering, because she's been a medical student. She's been very bright throughout her career in terms of her academia. And when she saw that faltering, she started questioning herself, because all her self-worth would come from her ability to grasp over whatever was being taught. She was a very good student. She took a lot of pride in that, but it was now affecting her self-esteem. And in her art journal, which she would keep instead of writing a diary, because she was a brilliant artist, we decided that she could keep an art journal where she would just express what she was feeling. And this is what she drew, where she wrote that I imagine myself as this girl. I feel so fragile that one gentle nudge has broken me into a million shards. That one incident with S has made me feel like I'm not whole anymore. So she questioned her being, her very being, and she tipped it on the point where she was not good enough, pretty enough, or skinny enough for her lover. So this is the tale of the girl, the lover, who was never skinny enough. I will go on to the next narrative, the narrative of who I'm going to call the daddy's girl. Daddy's girl is the youngest one I'm going to talk about in our developmental journey with her story. She's a 14-year-old female. She studies in Standard 9. She lives in Pune. And she presented with complaints of self-harm, emotional breakdowns, hyperventilation, and attentional issues. Because these sessions were online, like I said, that all of this was happening during the pandemic, the sessions were online. And I spoke to her mother, and her mother said that she's a daddy's girl. But she has been very, very close with her father. She's very close to her father, and she's really the daddy's girl. So all that goes on in her life, she just shares with her father. I'm often the odd one out. I don't get their jokes. I don't get their looks, I don't get their covert gestures, and one is just smiling at the other when I'm saying something, and both of them share these knowing laughs and these knowing bits, and I'm the one who's left out, and she is totally the daddy's girl. When I sat down with the girl and I delved into her history, trying to look at why there were complaints of self-harm, where she was also cutting herself, she was feeling very overwhelmed, I got to know that she has been sexually abused by her father. Not once, but at least 3 incidents where her father inappropriately touched her, which she reported as being molested. She was very, very uncomfortable with the touch, the way he touched her, the kind of look that she saw on his face, and she did not feel that it was the right kind of touch. Very significant in the history is that the mother, ever since the child was born, has remained ill. She has had several medical conditions. Her movement has been compromised with physiotherapy, with a lot of exercise and a lot of effort on her part. She can move about now. She has gained her movements back, but she continues to remain very unwell. It is only recently that she has gone into therapy for herself, but largely the father has been the primary caregiver for the child. Also to be noted is that the father, after she was about 6 or 7 years of age, has been living elsewhere for serious periods of time. I mean, continuously, he was not there at home with them. So by then, the mother had gained her movements back. She continues to remain unwell to this day, but more functional, definitely. And because of his travels, he would come back in bits and pieces back into their lives, which initially the girl was very, very, disappointed with. But later on, this happened when she was 12 years of age. Actually, it happened during the pandemic. And she knew that he was drinking, and that has come back time and again in our conversations, whether she should excuse him. These are the questions that she asks me, whether she should excuse him because he was drinking, and it was a wayward incident, but because it happened twice and thrice, she doesn't really know whether it was that one-off incident that just happened. Also, she says that one part of me can talk to my father for hours because he's the only ally, he's the only friend. And the other part completely loathes the hateful abuser for doing this to her, for completely ruining her. She's had her uncles who have had spent, several days at their place because the father is from a different part of the country. They are settled in Pune with more access to medical and other facilities where their uncles would travel. She has also been sexually abused once or twice or inappropriately touched by 2 of her uncles also. But she never thought that her father could be one of them. And she keeps on asking me that can I detach myself from him? And this dilemma, this core dilemma has continued to be there. And every time she feels that it is burgeoning to the fore, she feels overwhelmed. In school, she's had several episodes where she is hyperventilating. She's, trying to catch up on her breath. She cannot breathe because she tells me that at times these images just keep rushing back into my head. And I hate myself for, waiting for my father to come back home. I hate myself for being attached with my father, but I am the daddy's girl. Wasn't I always my daddy's girl? So this is the tale of the daughter. We heard the tale of the lover. I'm going to go on to the tale of the wife. She's a homemaker from Bangalore, 34 years, with 2 children. Presented with marital disharmony when I asked both the man and wife to speak. She told me about this incident, a particular incident which still rings in my ears actually, is that during lockdown, she was taking care of, she lives in a joint family with her in-laws, with her parents, in-law. Her children are there. One of her brother-in-laws are also there, who's unmarried. She has her husband. And there were no staff during the pandemic. Otherwise, they have a bevy of staff coming in who help them with all the domestic chores. But there was nobody. And they also have a fairly big house to take care of. So along with that, her childbearing responsibilities, because her younger one is just about 4 years old. And you know that all the schools were shut during the pandemic. So there was not only homemaking tasks to take care of. There were also child rearing responsibilities because the children were still attending school online and they were having to be engaged otherwise in her house. So she told me that one of these days, her husband, who is a 36-year-old male businessman, and so he asked her for coffee, and she was doing something. She was in the middle of something. She was very busy. And she said, I've got some ready coffee mugs. And so, one of those ready cappuccino things where you can just pour hot water and it's done. So she said, why don't you do something? Why don't you just heat some water in the microwave and make your coffee? And this is what he replied. And when I want coffee, I want it served on the table. And she told me that he wouldn't budge when he saw that I was just keeling over with the sheer amount of work that I was doing. And he wouldn't budge. He wouldn't even, heat some water in the microwave or the electric kettle and just pour himself a cup of coffee that he wanted. I didn't even want coffee. I didn't even ask him to make mine. And this is what he says to me, that when I want coffee, I want it served hot and on the table. So he wants to be served. So when I started talking to him, I sensed that is exactly the place that he was coming from, where he wanted to be served, period. I mean, lockdown notwithstanding, other situations notwithstanding, he just wanted to be served. If she would ask him to help out with certain chores or with, at least taking care of the children, she would find that he's not doing that. He was not engaging with the children. Maybe he would put on the TV for them or something like that, but not engage, not get emotionally involved or take it on as his responsibility. And this lack of emotional understanding and sensitivity from partner, and also mind you that she was harboring certain unrealistic expectations from herself that, should I really actually be the one to continuously be able to serve? So the fact that she was not being able to serve was also sitting heavy on her. That I'm supposed to take care of this household. I'm the bahu of the house. I should be able to manage this. I am a homemaker. I know how to go about it. I should be able to do it. And why am I not being able to do it? And why is this becoming such a big task for me? So that is also a question that kept on coming back in our sessions, where she felt that her husband was not sensitive to her needs nor her rights. And when he spoke to me, he told me that he's been brought up in a way where He's seen his mother take care of his father every inch of the way. He has seen his mother take care of him. I mean, till before he got married. I mean, be it pressing his shirts, keeping his shoes out, making somebody, clean up after him. He's not even had to make his bed. And he said that I have certain expectations from my wife, and I'm not asking her to do everything, cook and all, but when I want my coffee, I want it served to me. And that is the kind of narrative that continuously kept repeating itself, that he was the one who was hierarchically in a more superior position, whereas the woman of the house had to take care of his needs because that was her job. That was what she was meant to be doing, because after all, she's a housewife, is what he said. So this is the story of the Bahu. Now I go on to the story of the mother, the monster mom. Again, 36-year-old female, married, software engineer, with a 5-year-old child. So if you remember, initially there were no online classes for younger children. And later on it was started. She lives in Delhi. She presented with complaints of lethargy, temperamental issues, that she's losing her temper very frequently. She's getting angry very frequently and feeling low. So everything just feels very, very tedious. And she saw that she is hitting her child, which she's not done before. And she's been hitting her child more often. And she feels guilty because she's doing that she is hitting her child and very, and she feels very guilty, and she blames herself because she knows that she was not doing something which was so inexcusable that she would require to hit the child or punish the child in this way. So, and she told me that when I hit my child, I become like a monster mother. That, this is not the mom, this is the monster. And I'm just so angry, and I'm just taking it all out on her. I'm thrashing her, I'm hitting her. Why? Because she can't hit me back. Because she's having to take it all. The expectations here also was that it was just her who was having to deal with everything related to the child. So during the lockdown, both she and her husband are software professionals, and both were working from home. The IT industry actually did a lot of work where a lot of industries were actually shut, but the IT industry actually boomed. So there was a lot of work coming their way, and she was doing a lot of projects, and she was working with a lot of that. And she found herself asking herself this question, which she shared with me, that I kept on asking myself, is it just my prerogative? Is the child only the mother's prerogative? Is child rearing only the mother's responsibility? Because her husband seemed to think that she should be able to manage the child 24/7. So every time the child would go to the father and to be engaged, or to talk to him or to play with him, he would just call out to her and say that, can't you see that I'm working? And to which she would say that even I'm working. So why can't you take care of the child? I know you're working, but that can wait. So we also found that my client was hypersensitive, like by nature. These are her personality traits, that she's hypersensitive. She has obsessive traits also. And she wants to be a perfect mother. She does not want to give her child a lot of screen time. She does not want to punish her child in a brutal way. She does not want to resort to proper punishment. She wants to engage her child. She wants to be able to give it all to the child. But also, there were in these 2 rooms cooped up throughout the pandemic where the child could not go out anywhere. There was no other means of entertaining the child other than the screen, because both the parents were so engrossed in their work and their jobs. And she kept on blaming herself for being a monster mother, because she felt that she was not coming through, that she was not being able to, do justice for her child. The last of my narratives today is the tale of the widow and Karwa Chauth. 60-year homemaker, widowed during the pandemic. Her husband died of cancer, but things were made extremely difficult because of the pandemic, because of the circumstances of the lockdown and the protocols that had to be followed. And she presented with complaints of crying spells and loss of sleep and loneliness, lack of energy, lack of interest, anhedonia. There was no purpose she felt in living since her husband's death. She had 2 children, 2 grown-up children, both of them working. At that point of time, they were with her in Bhopal, but they had their jobs in Bangalore and Mumbai, respectively. She had initially left her career to be with her husband because her husband was working in Bhopal in one of those steel companies. So she could not find something meaningful to engage her. So she said that I was completely okay to just be with my husband and be there and raise my children. And so although she was, she had her master's degree and everything, she never thought about pursuing her career. She initially worked in service. She was in service, but she was happy to let go because she wanted to prioritize her family and raising her children. And ever since her husband's diagnosis with cancer, her life centered around caregiving for almost the last 2 years. And after her husband passed away, everybody has these very wise words to share. And most people actually do not know what to say to mourners. So they come and say that, you have to be very strong now. So she also started feeling guilty about crying, about breaking down, even after it was, let's say, 3 months after her husband's death. I think she came to me after 3 to 4 months after her husband's death. She said that, everybody tells me that I need to be strong for my children, that I ought to be more, put together, more organized, but I can't. I am just going on crying, and I feel his loss every day, and I'm not being able to be strong. And I think our first 2 sessions went on in just discussing how she need not be strong, how grief is a cycle. Each and every one experiences grief in a different way, depends on the kind of relationship that you have with that person. It is not just about, going through the stages of grief, but also that everybody is going to go through the stages in their own time, at their own pace. You cannot actually hurry through grief. But there were 2 to 3 incidents that she spoke about. Like I said, that it was 3 to 4 months after. And she would constantly tell me that, is it okay, if I keep on wearing the pala, the red bangle that married women in Bengal wear, other than the white bangle, which is known as shaka. So she would ask me that, is it okay if I keep on wearing the pala? Is it okay if I keep on wearing the bindi? Is it okay if I put on some lipstick? And I would reflect the question back to her and said, why do you think it's not okay? And she would tell me that, what will others think if I dress up? Will they not think that I'm not mourning? And will they not judge me because of this? So while we were discussing that how her grief is hers and how crying is also actually a normal reaction to this abnormal situation that has happened, and how she was very, very connected to her husband. They were very, very healthily connected, and she would share a lot of her day with her husband, telling him, the teeniest of details about her life, about where she's going, what she's doing with her friends and everything. And suddenly she didn't have anybody to share that with. So she had friends and she could connect with at least one or two of them. In the meantime, what happened while our sessions were ongoing, it was the time of the year when people celebrate Karwa Chauth. And because they're in central India, Karwa Chauth was a big festival. And she said that there were women gathering and everybody was, just gathered there doing the celebrations of Karwa Chauth. And they never called me. Am I not married because my husband is not living anymore? I felt excluded. I felt out of the group because I was not part of Karwa Chauth. And she felt that there was a lack of her identity. That this identity of the married woman, when the husband is no more, does it question the marriage itself? Should she just keep on wearing her red bangle to tell people that she is still married? Just because he is no more does not mean that she is not married to him, because she is still connected to him. And should she have been part of the Karwa Chauth celebrations? These were questions that kept on coming back. And what would others think? And what did they think when they did not call me? And should I participate in rituals that are meant for married women? Or do I not go? Or do I expect not to be invited because I'm a widow? So with that, I stop talking about the narratives and I move on to two empirical studies that were carried out under my supervision by my master's students in 2021 period. The first study was carried out by Shivli Ghosh under my guidance. It was on working mothers, and we explored the area of parenting in the pandemic. Actually, after I spoke to the monster mom, the study idea came to me and we looked into the literature and finalized our area. So, daily diary study and interview method pre-pandemic shows that work-life guilt associated with more conventional gender behavior in working mothers. Okay, so we actually divided the group into working mothers and homemaker mothers. And we also found that in 2020, working from home is becoming more challenging for women than working from office. Because of state-imposed lockdown had a negative impact on resilience and quality of life of young-aged working mothers. Also, work from home is negatively associated with tendency to increasing risk for women. So for her, the methodology that was used was purposive sampling with 25 participants, with 16 working mothers and 9 homemaker mothers. We used a depression inventory, NEO 5-factor inventory, which is basically to assess personality factors, state anger scale of from StatC. We just used the state anger domain, and parenting and familial adjustment scale was used. Having small children is reported as being a potential source of exhaustion and sometimes leads to parental burnout. This is a pre-pandemic study. During the pandemic, it actually went on double-fold. And Kisana and Shah study also confirms that psychological abuse is one of the core reasons behind depression in women during the pandemic, where we found them, BDI-2 gives us a measure of the amount of depression that one is experiencing in a given month. And Any score above 9 is beyond the cutoff level. Working mothers had scored 12.13. The SD you can see is very significantly high, and homemaker mothers with a mean of 18, which is moderately depressed. And also in terms of state anger, I'm not going to go into the other details too much, but look at this, that state anger, any score above 10 is very significant. They have scored 15 and 18 each. So we also had interviews being taken over telephonic interviews. So 7 of the 16 working mothers reported that they faced greater conflict in balancing their work and family life because they were actually having to do a lot more of the household work. And level of patience, 4 out of 9 homemaker mothers and 9 out of 16 working mothers reported patience level had decreased during the pandemic. 10 out of 16 working mothers reported that they felt their family ties strengthened during the pandemic also, and that they were actually spending more time with each other also. 11 out of 16 working mothers and 7 out of 9 homemaker mothers found childcare more stressful during the pandemic, especially because the schools were initially shut for about 1.5 years for children. Recreation and self-care, 9 of them reported more engagement in hobbies and recreational activities, and the ones who were engaging in hobbies were actually doing better in terms of their depression index. Emotional changes in them among 9 homemakers, 4 reported that due to the pandemic, all family members had come under one roof, that they created psychological distress. I'll tell you why they said that is because that they felt that that their space was being invaded. That a lot of homemaker mothers said that, you know, when my husband would leave for work, the child would leave for school, I just had the house to myself, and now I felt entrapped in a house that doesn't feel like my house anymore. It is something very unfamiliar to me. And the more the level, we also found that the more the level of aggression, the more the depression and subjective feeling of distress among mothers. And we borrowed from to make sense of it, we borrowed from the frustration aggression hypothesis that aggression is a response, out of frustration that would permit aggressive as well as depressive responses. So which explains why the state anger was so high among these women, and also the depression score, because there's also a lot of guilt associated with, being the kind of parent that I do not want to be, yet I'm not being able to balance it all out. In sum, we concluded that the present study is an empirical approach to look into the problems of parenting in a pandemic when schools, leisure, play opportunities have not been available to children, and mothers have had to manage not just their own work, but also household chores, their own physical and mental health issues. It is not surprising, therefore, that mothers of young children responded to the pandemic and their parenting responsibilities with elevated measures of anger and depression. I'm going to quickly talk about my second study and then open the house for questions and comments. The next one was a study of the status of women mental health practitioners. And this work was primarily done by Shabnam Sultana, supervised by me. So in the pandemic has created several demands on the mental health professionals, just like any other caregivers. The surge in itself in generic compromise in mental health conditions has imposed a heavy burden on mental health professionals. There has been an increase in the rates of suicide, substance use disorder, domestic abuse, anxiety and depressive disorder, and the reporting and the management levels have also risen. COVID-19 pandemic has had high prevalence in anxiety, depression, insomnia among healthcare workers. And we found that we were able to work with 29 females who were all mental health practitioners. So some of them counselors, some of them psychotherapists, but all providing mental health care during the pandemic. So we use the tools like general health questionnaire that looks into psychiatric morbidity, perceived stress scale, positive and negative affect schedule, and subjective workload assessment technique. So the questionnaires were provided for quantitative data and mixed method was used. So we also had telephonic interviews for qualitative data. And the mental health professionals, or MHPs, were divided into two groups for an additional analysis, where we looked at, based on years of experience in clinical practice, whether they were handling things any differently. So the findings obtained from the MHPs on GHQ, which is General Health Questionnaire, reveals an average total of about 5.22. The cutoff is, however, 4 for GHQ. So you can understand that indicating presence of high psychiatric morbidity among the participants. And the mean score of perceived stress was 19.97, which is moderate level, because the range is from 4 to 39, indicating moderate level of perceived stress among the mental health practitioners. The mean score of positive affect was 33.94 and negative affect was 19.84, indicating within average levels of affect. High perceived stress among the MHPs were consistent with previous studies, and it was positively associated with negative affect. So there was a correlation between GHQ total and negative affect, and it can be seen as a measure to predict presence of perceived stress also among the MHPs. Perceived stress was found to be inversely correlated, however, with years of experience. So however experienced you are, then your perception of perceived stress is also goes down. So when the groups were divided on the basis of years of clinical experience, the younger professional reported significantly higher levels of PSS and negative affect than senior professionals, which indicated that they had better coping skills in place, the senior professionals. With the increase of time load and decrease in spare time, the MHPs felt more stressed out. Mental effort load is positively correlated with psychiatric morbidity also. So it increases psychiatric morbidity, and decrease of psychological well-being with increased mental workload, which is consistent with previous studies. So what we concluded from both the quantitative and qualitative analysis of the data is that there is a significant relationship between perceived stress, workload, psychiatric morbidity, and negative affect. Though both the groups showed an increase in perceived stress and negative affect, younger professionals scored much higher on these domains. A tremendous increase in workload and perceived stress among the participants did have an impact on their physical and mental health. Participants who could manage to take out time for self-care and recreation reported less stress and anxiety than those who could not manage to do it. So these were all women mental health professionals, mind you, who were also dealing with similar dynamics at home. Often we found friends discussing that, when my husband takes care of the child, I go up to him and thank him for it, And what about me doing 24/7, 365 days a week? I mean, nobody comes and thanks me and acknowledges my effort the same. So my conclusion is, I would just like to part with the questions that have remained from the girl, the lover, the bahu, the mother, the widow. Is our body image going to define who we are going into the future also? Is there no place which is going to be safe enough for a girl child? Is her home not going to be safe enough for her? Is her father not going to be a safe caregiver for her? Is the wife not an equal? Does she not have rights? Is parenting a child only the mother's responsibility and priority? Is the woman going to lead her life by the thoughts of the society? So these questions have come up time and again in the sessions, and not just in the 5 narratives that I shared, but these are more open, generic questions for all of us to think upon, ponder about. I feel that the mental health of a woman is intrinsically connected with the mental health of the social environment around her. And her stories are still navigated by patriarchal rules and misogyny. I would end with this page from my client's art journal, and each and every image speaks to me. I would take any feedback, comments, and queries that you might have. Thank you.
Sreemoyee ma'am,
Yes.
thank you so much for that breathtaking presentation. It was very, very thought-provoking indeed. And you have shared extremely sensitive cases which reflected on the lived experiences of women, her experiences of agony, suffering, discomfort, her struggle to retain her identity in her day-to-day existence. And this emotional abuse or the psychological violence which has got reflected through your narratives is perhaps, very few women often realize that they are experiencing such emotional abuse and psychological violence. So, ma'am, thank you so much for this very, very intriguing presentation. And without much delay, there are a number of questions that are waiting for you. So I will take them up one by one.
Sure.
So we have the first question by Anjan Shaha. And he says that, does women require more psychological counseling in comparison to men? If yes, why?
Okay, whether they require more psychological counseling is not really a statistic that we have, but whether women do suffer more mental health issues is a clear statistic, yes. Why is perhaps, like I said, that the rules that govern men and women in the society are not the same. So whatever is okay, whatever can be taken for granted for men is not what is available at times for women to claim as their birthright. So I think it is more of the societal, the pulls, the impediments that are there, which is intrinsically there. And like I said, that it is there in the environment right from the start. I mean, if she's living, it is a miracle that she has not been identified as female and there has not been any infanticide there. Whether she's discriminated, every point. I mean, I am yet to hear a woman who's walked into my chamber, and like I said, I have almost 18 to 20 years of seeing clients. I do not recall. I've often had this discussion with my students that when the Me Too campaign, was very relevant, that we've gone back to questioning this and reflecting upon that. Not Me Too could be a campaign. Me Too is hardly a campaign. So I don't have very clear-cut answers, but women have more mental health issues, yes, and they do. But they are not often, they do not often have access to mental health care, because especially something like psychotherapy would need time, would need money. A lot of women do not have that. Even if they do, they think it is not important when it comes to them. So a lot of times, the mothers who come to us are the index client, but they come with the child. They've come because there is a problem with the child, and when we have spoken to the family members, we realize that it is actually the mother who has problems. So, yes.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much for the answer. Going to the second question by Utkolika. Do you think the women are more prone to develop various body image issues? If yes, is it in any way connected to their sole obsession with looks? There are two additional questions made by her. How do you think does the low confidence level regarding one's looks mostly get manifested? Do you think a psychologist's role in calming a person down regarding his or her looks is in any way at loggerheads with the role of a cosmetic surgeon?
Okay, good positioning. I'll just take it one by one. Do you think women are more prone to develop various body image issues? The statistic shows that they are. If yes, which is yes, in any way connected to the sole obsession with looks, there is no sole obsession with looks here, even for people who have body image issues, because body image is also a social construct. So BMI is an objective factor, but it is not often BMI that guides body image issues. One can have perfect BMI yet have a very odd body image issue, very dysfunctional body image issue. So it is, like I said, that it is a social construct. So a lot of times we see that social media has a lot to do with it. We see conversations have a lot to do with it. How women who are perceived as fat are having problems in their dating life have a lot to do with it. So none of the problems are actually just single pronged, I mean, it doesn't really come up because of a single factor. So that how do you think does the low confidence level regarding one's looks mostly get manifested? In several ways. I mean, in how they talk, how they carry themselves, in their body language, in their performance, because a lot of people are actually confident or not confident, not just depending on their looks, but how they perceive themselves. Whether they have adequacy issues is actually the main thing to be considered there. So do you think a psychologist's role in calming a person down regarding his or her looks is anyway loggerheads with the role of a cosmetic surgeon? I would think yes, because again, the way we are approaching it is completely different. Whereas a psychologist would work upon acceptance, a cosmetic surgeon would thrive upon that very disregard of that acceptance and want that change. Okay, so yes, that is a good way of looking at it. And there is another rejoinder, isn't it, from Utkolika?
I think that is the same one.
Right. Just yes.
So any more questions for ma'am?
I see a raised hand, Shuma Paul.
Juma, can you just put down your question in the chat box, please? If you have a question. Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for joining us today. And it was a pleasure listening to you. And hope to interact with you again in future. Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you to all the participants for their patient listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.